Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Preston Clark. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at SimpleDocs. I'm joined by my colleague, Jennifer Davidson, VP of Higher Education and Partnerships. Jennifer and I will introduce ourselves more thoroughly in just a moment. The webinar topic or title for today is Accelerating Sponsored Research and Tech Transfer Agreements with Legal AI. We're talking about what it means for AI tools that are transactional focused, that are contract focused, what it means for the work that you all do day in and day out in your institutions of higher ed where you work. For context on who we are as an organization, we have 10,000 legal professionals that rely on our platform today globally. Jennifer and I are based in North America. A lot of our customers are here, but we also serve multinational global corporations, publicly traded companies, and beyond. For those of you who are familiar with the name Law Insider, I'm also the creator of lawinsider.com. I started that over 15 years ago. And that's relevant because a part of the story that we'll be talking about today is what it means to bring context and data into an AI drafting and review experience and where that data comes from. And sitting on top of the largest public contract database in the world turns out to be a big advantage for us in the products that we build and deliver to our customers. I mentioned that we serve very large corporations. Our focus is mostly in-house legal departments or procurement departments or tech transfer departments and other. We do work with a couple of thousands of law firms as well. So we've met the very high standards from a due diligence and data privacy perspective. We'll talk a little bit about that today, but certainly if you have questions about that later, we can get to it. An introduction for Jennifer and I think it's appropriate. We'll move through this quickly. I will go first, Jennifer, and then I will pass it to you. In a previous life, I created Law Insider. Life previous to that, I was Assistant General. For Jennifer and I, as she will tell her own story, higher ed is really important to us. It's important to us because we've spent many years of our lives working in and around higher ed, and we know that the use cases are unique and distinct and often overlooked in sort of general software. And so this is something that Jennifer and I have a lot of experience in, and so we're coming at this today with, I think, a degree of experience and expertise, not as much as each of you, no doubt, but we're certainly we know that every institution, whether it's a land grant institution or a small private or a community college system or other, has its own unique challenges. And so we try to build products and configurations that align to higher ed. So that's the vantage point I'm coming into this. Jennifer, please introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Preston. My name is Jennifer Davidson. You may hear Preston call me Jen. So at some point, if we ever connect one-on-one, feel free to do the same. As you mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Higher Education, and I'm really charged with helping understand where SimpleAI can help institutions and create more efficiencies around contracting processes. And I've had the privilege of connecting over the past 6 months with University of Texas, Dallas, whose story we'll share with you here momentarily, but also over the past several months with other institutions with similar departments such as yours. So, Florida Atlantic, Caltech, Oklahoma State, University of Cincinnati, and others, and really thinking about where SimpleAI can help provide that support. So hopefully today you're going to get a bit of that. And then certainly if you're interested in connecting one-on-one, I'll be there to support that as well. So thanks so much for that, Preston.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. We will start with the story, and we'll focus on Texas at Dallas, but also more broadly. I would like to tell you that given my higher ed experience, that I knew where the opportunity for legal AI software, contract software would resonate the most in higher ed, and turns out I was wrong. Jennifer and I thought that we would approach the offices of the General Counsel and that would be the best entry point. And every time we knocked on those doors, they said, "Oh, you should go to sponsored research and tech transfer because those are the offices that are moving the most paper, so to speak, that are reviewing the highest volume of contracts and the highest volume of contracts that often have a lot of complexity built into them." And so that's what has provoked us to go deep and to analyze the opportunity there. And so some of what we'll be sharing with you is how other institutions like Dallas are working, as well as sort of macro trends on AI adoption for transactional work. But in the case of Texas at Dallas specifically, it was their Office of Technology Commercialization, and we had a great sponsor there who we'll talk about. And he identified that he was seeing an increase in volume of contracts to review, no increased headcount to support that review, and then lots of sort of manual processes to manage that volume. So some of it is just the day in, day out work of reviewing contracts in a consistent way. And some of it is how you manage that, how you make sure nothing is slipping through the cracks. We all know something is always slipping through the cracks, but how we minimize that. And so they saw a good opportunity to adopt legal AI technology that we'll talk about to help streamline some of the volume challenges that they had. What they were specifically streamlining with AI is the acceleration of redlining and review inside Microsoft Word. So this is software that integrates inside Microsoft, and that is applying red lines and recommendations and risk ratings against a document, either red lines on their own paper or third-party agreements that they'd never seen before, but nevertheless had rules for and negotiation positions for. Agreement summaries. Summaries broadly defined as not just give me a summary of this document, but actually identifying risks, identifying abnormalities, identifying issues that are sort of outside the norm or standard for an agreement of that type. And then the last one, perhaps most importantly, is the concept of negotiation playbooks. And I'm sure you all know what a negotiation playbook is because you have some version of this already, even if it means you're going to the Penn State website to look up FAR and DFAR regulations in their matrix. But you have a mechanism today to compare the agreement you're reviewing against your negotiation positions, and then you're sort of channel switching back and forth to make sure that the document is consistent or is modified or redlined to be consistent with your rules. So in the case of UT Dallas, we saw an opportunity, or they saw an opportunity, to implement advanced playbooks using AI technology so that they could get to a first draft much faster, and that first draft mirrored their primary positions and their negotiation styles. So this was sort of the use case for Dallas. The outcome, not surprisingly, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it, of course, was very favorable, and that they've seen incredible success, both from an adoption perspective, meaning the number of lawyers using it within the team, and the frequency of use, but also the quality of the output. One of the many concerns I think we all have about software adoption, AI adoption maybe specifically, is will this get used consistently? And in order for it to get used consistently, it has to be easy to use, but also the output, especially for lawyers. And as a former transactional lawyer myself, like if the product is not in fact getting me answers faster, proposing changes faster, like if it's not actually doing that work consistently well, then I'm just playing with a tool that is probably not saving me time. And so I think in the case of Dallas, we had those wins, and so we were able to see it through to the end. And even if if you take nothing from the webinar today, you don't need to select us as a vendor. You don't need to use our tool. You need to test our tool, of course. But I do think that we are seeing a really good opportunity for sponsored research and tech transfer departments in the adoption of AI for contract review and for redlining. So there's other ways to do it other than us. I think we were particularly good at it. But I think this is if nothing else, this is a good opportunity for you to start thinking more seriously, if you have not already, about bringing these tools into your work. On that note, I'm going to tell you briefly what it is we do, but I am going to spend about 10 minutes going through a recent market study we just completed that talks about how AI is being adopted globally by transactional lawyers. I'm going to share this to you because I think you'll find it interesting. It had over 500 participants, very sound data, very statistically significant data set. Um, and if nothing else, you'll be able to use it because we'll share the slides with you to make internal business case around how the world is adopting AI for contracts. And so if you're getting pushback or you anticipate pushback in terms of adopting a tool like this, these slides I think will be helpful. But before I do that, categorically, we work as an organization in three product categories. SimpleAI, you'll hear Jennifer and I mention that name. This is our Microsoft Word add-in. This is where a lot of the AI tooling lives to accelerate contract review. This is where we'll spend a bunch of time today because this is the UT Dallas use case. This is where we're seeing the strongest connection with tech transfer and sponsored research departments. We also have an AI repository. Invariably, when you start seeing the benefits of AI on a single document, you start asking the question, gosh, could I pull this across hundreds or thousands of documents, either to establish or review precedent, to see trends, to identify risks, et cetera? Or, gosh, do we already have an NDA in place with this organization? Whatever that may be. In the age of AI, what's possible there is far superior to what was possible before. The use case that I like to give that we've all lived through is during COVID, suddenly everyone needed to go find the force majeure clauses that existed in all of our contracts. And pre-AI, that turns out that was very difficult to do unless you were just going to manually do the work. And in the age of AI, that use case can be answered or solved for in a matter of seconds, which is incredible. The third category is workflow. This is how paper moves within the organization, either how contracts get assigned internally to different stakeholders and how that work is then tracked. And so you can measure contract volumes that are coming in and how long it's taking to work through them. Also, workflows can be used for outbound agreements, how paper is moved out either for approval or ultimately for signature. So this is another category that we exist in as an organization. But it's that first one, it's Simple AI that we'll talk about today because I think it's most applicable to the work that you all are doing. Before I get into the report, into the study, just for orientation, these are the friction points that we care most about. And by care most about, I mean we build for this friction, or we automate this friction, or we smooth this friction. We care about your volume and complexity of third-party contracts. How many agreements and of what type are coming into your different parts of the organization, sponsored research, et cetera? Is it 10 a month? Is it 30 a month? Is it 100 a month? How long are those documents? How much time does it take to go through them and mark them up? And our job is to try to massively reduce the time it takes to do that. We also support first party, and this is red lines that are coming back on your own paper. I suspect with this group, there's less of that, but probably some. And what it looks like to benchmark against your own internal precedent and to be able to make recommendations based on your rules as well as what you've done in the past. Third is drafting. Again, I suspect with this group, there's probably less of that. There's less new agreements. This is often a law firm use case, but this is an area where we add a lot of value. Managing contract requests and approvals, what it takes, irrespective of the redlining or markup process, what it looks like to move a contract within an organization for approval, escalations, review cycles, et cetera. And then the last one is finding information and sign contracts. I just talked about that with respect to repository, what it means to surface insights or trends or risks in a way that is much more dynamic than we would have been able to do in a pre-AI world. So these are the friction points that we're looking for with our customers, and the more one or more of these resonates with you, the more likely AI, whether you go with us or not, I can just tell you categorically, these are challenges that AI is very good at solving. Okay. I'm going to take a few minutes now to go into market data. We are sending a full report early next week, which synthesizes in much greater detail what I'm going to cover here in the next 5 or 6 minutes. Um, Survey methodology. These are the questions we asked 534 respondents who are transactional lawyers around the world. Um, we wanted to know which AI tool they preferred in their contract work, how often they were using that, what it would mean to them if they lost access to that tool, meaning how important it had become, how much they trusted the tool. One of the questions that you all are probably asking is, AI has a lot of confidence, right? We know this in our personal lives. It is sort of all the confidence of a 13-year-old saying, yes, this is the best thing ever. You should just trust it. What does it mean in the legal sphere, contract in particular? Where do the confidence levels prevail, or where are they less? Um, what types of queries or what types of tasks within transactional work is the world relying on? And so, like, is this contract review? Is it drafting? Is it summaries? Is it redlining? So we'll look at that data. And then this last one, what feature or capability would you most like to see? Gives you sort of a glimpse into the future. And I think you'll head nod a bit too, because you'll see sort of what the world wants from a transactional perspective as it relates to AI. The survey methodology went out to 400,000 subscribers, transactional lawyers around the world. The data was vast. The largest single group was in-house. This could include procurement. This could include tech transfer departments and other, but in-house was the largest concentration, and legal team size varied. I know that some of you on this call today are probably team of one, and others of you might be parts of a larger team. But we saw, a broad spectrum there of use. This is perhaps the first big insight that I wanted to share with you. Among the 530 plus respondents, the largest number are using AI now multiple times a day for contract review drafting. And I think that that's significant, especially because 2 years ago, probably maybe a little bit longer, but 2 years ago, none of us were using AI in any capacity in our lives, certainly not in our work. And the idea that it's gone so far as to now being something that's used multiple times a day, I think is quite significant and speaks to the trend and the direction. And so if you're finding yourself in a position where you're like, gosh, I'm not using it at all, like that's okay. You may feel strongly about never using it at all, but I doubt you'd be on this webinar if that were the case, but perhaps. But if you're not yet using it at this level, I suspect this is where the whole world is going, because this is how I think legal has worked forever, is that once a tool becomes the default, it becomes the default for the entire profession, whether that's email or other tools. So this is, I think, an interesting trend. However, this is where it gets a little scary. Despite that incredible adoption multiple times a day, the percentage that said that of users that said they were very confident in the AI output is extremely low. And so, what does this mean? How do you reconcile it? Well, part of that reconciliation is that this is not a self-driving car. So, for those of you who are also ominously saying, gosh, am I going to be out of a job because of I can tell you no time soon, because it very much, to use the car metaphor, you need to have your hand on the steering wheel, because the AI is not good enough for you to just set it and forget it. And so it is wonderfully powerful, as we'll look and talk about today. But the confidence score has some room to grow. And what that means, though, is that you will need to review and validate the work, almost like if it were a junior paralegal or a junior associate who is giving you first draft output. we were all that first year paralegal or the first year associate. We've been there. We know that our work was pretty good, but it needed another set of eyes. And I think that that's probably a good comparison for how the state of AI is today. Not to brag, but our tool, the one that we'll look at today, was the highest ranking among all of the vendors that were included in the survey, and but we were still only at 18%. So you still need to keep your hand on the steering wheel with us, but the good news is that perhaps a little bit less so. I think notable here too is if you're looking at the broader AI horizon right now, both of the two vendors that had the highest degree of confidence are legal specialized tools, and that's Simple AI, that's SimpleDocs and Spellbook. And then it drops off from there, and you'll see that these others are general purpose AI tools. And so it's not surprising that these would produce less confident output for transactional work. And then how disappointed would you be if your AI tool of choice went away? Also, great to know that we rank very high here. So we tend to be very good at building confidence. I don't want to just brag about us, but this is how the data played out. What it's being used for. So I've foreshadowed this a lot already, but where are people getting value from AI in transactional work? Drafting, reviewing third-party agreements, summarizing, proposing red lines. So you sort of go down the list. Hopefully these are things that are logical and that would make sense to you. But also, if you're spending lots of time in these areas today, does signal that there's a chance that AI can save you some time. To draw a distinction, though, is that where we saw the most, so going back to this slide, where we saw the most usage was in what we call sort of general production tasks, summaries, analysis, and where there's less adoption is in judgment, institutional knowledge. This is where we are particularly strong, but that I think the general purpose tools are not. And that is a segue into what we'll be talking about today, is what it means to configure a tool like ours to meet the negotiation and institutional policies, so that it's not just a generic recommendation, but it's a very crafted the same way you would do it with your own institutional knowledge, but it's basing the recommendations off of things that you're already doing, things for which you have documentation. I'm going to show you a couple more slides here, and then we're gonna move on. But what do transactional lawyers want AI to do better? Now, these are areas where we are already strong, because this survey was not just about us, it was other vendors as well, as you've seen. But I think you'll find this interesting, is that one of the the recommendations that came in was automatic FAR and DFAR referencing. I assume that some of you are quietly clapping and saying, yes, please, because you know that this is an area that takes a lot of time. And I will tell you, because we are well down the road of building this ourselves, that this sort of configurability where you're comparing an agreement to a statute or to policies, no matter how complex or detailed the documentation on that is, the idea that you could get a risk rating or an alert or a proposed red line based on how an agreement conforms with FAR and DFAR or other, I think is pretty interesting. So that is one of the requests that came in, and it's something that we're actively working on. Another is just this concept of a verification layer, so that when a recommendation is coming in, that you're seeing a citation for that. So it's one thing to say, hey, this agreement is non-standard, or this clause is imbalanced or non-standard, but it's something else to say why and then source to that. And this is an area, as you'll see today, where we're particularly strong. I just have a couple more slides here. Another area of requests: playbook aware contract review contracts against a company's actual playbook, fallback positions, approval matrix, and negotiation standards. We do this this makes sense as a requirement. Without this, it's hard for a tool like this to give the scaled value you need it to. It needs to know your rules. It needs to know all of them. And then it needs to do a great job of identifying those rules and proposing changes that you can then accept, reject, modify, etc. Clause benchmarking, both against market data as well as institutional precedent, so that you can say, how have we done this in the past, or what does the market say about this? So this is another area where we are strong, but that the market is looking for. And then once you've analyzed a single agreement, can you pull across the analysis to other portfolio-wide contract analysis, and being able to see data visualization to give you insights into trends in contract volume, trends in, are you accepting, you know, I know many of you have a lot of leverage in your negotiations, so there may be less of this, but I think that you would like to know patterns of where you are deviating from your own internal policies, because you're certainly not rejecting every red line that comes in. There's always some degree of negotiation. But the idea that you could identify trends and then use those trends to either modify your templates or signal and identify risks for the organization seems like it's something that may be specifically of interest to colleges and universities. And then the last one is intake to business ready output. So it's not just the contract itself, but now what? What is the nest? What is the adjacent task that I am to do here? I know for some of you, you may be creating tables or grids that go clause by clause. In some cases, you're receiving PDFs for which maybe you convert the PDF and redline it, or your practice is to create a table that says clause 3.2, modify accordingly, and that's what you're then sending back to counsel. But this idea that the AI can also generate work product that supports your contract work, this is an area that we've seen lots of requests. We are strong here already, but this signals to you sort of hopefully outputs that would be valuable. I'm going to do a bit of a beat change here and pause. We're about halfway through. Jennifer, I'm not sure if questions have come in or if there's anything that you want to add here at this point.
I think that there was somebody that did have raise their hand. Dory's asked if they have a question. So Donna, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat and Preston will be responsive to that. But I think broadly speaking, I would just underscore the notion of scalability and how this presented at the University of Texas, Dallas. They were doing a lot of this work manually, whether it was by email and trying to find a term in the way that it was written, or have a playbook based on an Excel document and having that evolve and change over time and having some drift, and then being able to take that playbook and apply it within SimpleAI, and then have everybody working from that same playbook and leveraging the opportunity for consistency in that case, and then obviously be able to escalate as needed. And I think, Preston, you'll show where institutions can apply playbooks, but then, as you said, keep the human in the loop, if you will, or keep the lawyer in the loop from from their perspective. In other words, you just don't blindly accept what the program is offering.
Yeah. Lawyer in the loop. I haven't heard that expression. I'm gonna steal that, Jen. That was good. Um, okay. So that is the study. We will send the full report out to all of you next week, and encourage you to spend some time with that and use it as an internal tool to advocate for software to the extent that you think it's beneficial to you. Okay, what we're going to look at today is an example of a tool. In this case, it's our tool, but I will stress that our tool, while very good, is not the only way to do this. And so, if nothing else, this doesn't need to be a sales pitch as much as a framing of here's the type of work that institutions like yours can automate or streamline with an AI tool like ours. playbook-based contract review, precedent-based benchmarking, market intelligence review, AI-generated red lines and comments, clause drafting and rewriting, all inside Microsoft Word. I think that most institutions, probably all of you here today, draft inside Microsoft Word, review inside Microsoft Word. If not, we do have solutions that are browser-based. We're not going to talk about those as much today. But if you are one of those, please let us know, and we can save a little bit of time at the end to talk about what it looks like to use a tool like this outside of Microsoft Word. There's a concept which we refer to as the contract intelligence layer. And this is, I think, a good mental model for what it means to configure AI for your institution's unique needs. We know every college and university is distinct, every system is distinct, and using AI means to model the software against your uniqueness. And we think of this as sort of three legs of a stool. And the first is your policies. And these manifest in written documentation, which we call playbooks, fallbacks. What is your primary position? What is your secondary position? What are the guidance notes say? Is it how do you treat Microsoft and Google? Like when I was early at the University of Miami as an associate GC, I remember there was a whole webinar I sat through, which was about how you can't negotiate with Microsoft, but that if you were going to try, here were the areas, but that there was no real leverage in those negotiations. I suspect times have changed a bit, and there's probably other vendors in that category now. But the concept of fallbacks becomes something that is one of the layers for the AI. The second is precedent. This is what you've done in the past, and it's the analysis of variance. It's we don't always get what we want, and sometimes we have to settle. And what are the patterns in that settling? What do we do for vendor agreements? What do we do for tech transfer agreements? Where do we not always get our primary position? And then how can I verify that? I know a lot of us have learned to sort of go off our gut on that and to say, I know generally speaking, this is how we approach this issue, and I'm just going to go with that. And the benefit here is that with a tool like ours, you can pull that data inside Microsoft Word and say, how many times have we accepted something like this before? And you can even go a layer deeper and say, how many times have we accepted something like this before with this organization? How many times have we accepted this with Walmart? How many times have we accepted this with Apple? How many times have we accepted this with Microsoft? So you're getting a sense of negotiation leverage, internal tolerance for deviation from standard, et cetera. And then the last is what we call market standards. And this is the ability to sort of have an external precedent, if you will, to say not just what do we do, but what does the market do relative to negotiations like this? This becomes just another set of eyes. As Jen said, this is still lawyer in the loop where you need to be deciding whether or not that market data is useful to you. You may say, gosh, I know that, it sounds like, this is non-standard what they're proposing, but I don't think we have leverage to have them do otherwise. You will know more than we do, or that the AI will. You'll know more than the AI does. But the AI will be very good at giving you market recommendations that then you can use. So really, it's what we all learned in law school. It's the ability to surface the information that becomes most important, right? Or at least the first step. Maybe not most important, but it's the first step. Is where is the information upon which I will use my legal judgment to make a final decision or recommendation. So these are the intelligence layers that can be used to configure the AI to meet your institutional requirements. Okay, I'm going to touch on two more slides, and then I'm going to jump in and show you what this looks like live. So let me just breeze through some slides here. Integrations can become important, whether it's single sign-on or other tools that you might be using, where the data or the intelligence can be pulled from. And these are vast. There's sort of innumerable integrations that are possible. Um, we also have an incredible team of legal engineers. What is a legal engineer? Did that title exist 2 years ago? It did not, but it's become quite prevalent now. These are transactional lawyers who are now AI experts, and in this case, experts in our own tools, who we use to partner with you and institutions like yours to better configure the product so that it mirrors how you negotiate. I don't want to represent anyone that configuring software to operate in the way we've described is something that is implemented overnight. It oftentimes can take 6 to 8 weeks to get the full software configured to mirror your negotiation styles. And I think you would expect it to, right? It's to extract the data, to identify the patterns, and then to codify that takes a little bit of back and forth, but we have a great team that drives that initiative. Okay. Most importantly, perhaps for some of you, SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, data storage, how data is managed, governance internally. So, irrespective of data storage, who can access what? These are things that our customers, both higher ed customers as well as publicly traded companies, care a great deal about, and we are very good at. And then, my last slide, perhaps most importantly, is that we don't train on your data. And so, one of the questions is, how does the tool get better? Well, we get better because we sit on top of the largest public contract database in the world with Law Insider. We don't need to train on your data. We don't want to train on your data. We don't want to store your data. We want to give you an answer, give you a recommendation, and then let you move on to your next task without any concerns for where that data is going, et cetera. This is different from precedent or things that are configured to your exact requirements. So in those cases, it's a configuration, but we're not training the models on your data. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to pull up the product now and show you what this looks like so that you can see it live. I will, before I do that, just give you a glimpse into what it looks like when you roll out a tool like ours, where you can now have visibility into, imagine this, I think this will hopefully inspire some of you. The beauty of using a tool that is in the business of reviewing and proposing recommendations and reducing contract review time is that the adoption of that tool gives you incredible insights that Microsoft just by itself would not allow, would not enable. And those insights can be what types of contracts are being reviewed, at what volume, how long is it taking to get through those, which playbooks are being applied, which team members are reviewing the most agreements? How are they using it? What's the frequency with which they're reviewing contracts? So one of the benefits of adopting a tool like ours is it gives you a layer of insight that you would otherwise not have. So I'm going to jump into the product now, but I wanted to give that sneak peek into once a tool like ours is deployed, it also enables some insights that you would otherwise not have access to. Jennifer, while I'm doing this, if any questions came in or if you want to add anything, please feel free to do so.
Yep, no questions yet, but it's just a good reminder if you do have questions, and I think a lot of the questions will come in as we start to show Simple AI, Preston, so I'll keep an eye on it.
Great, great. Um, okay. Um, so I'm inside Microsoft Word, and on the right-hand side, you'll see Simple AI, as Jennifer mentioned. And this is what we call a Microsoft Word add-in. It's relatively easy to install. It's cloud-based and it's customizable and configurable to your institution. I'm going to show you 6 or 7 primary use cases. But I would love questions here that relate to what you are trying to accomplish or how you might think the tool could add value. And I will mirror that. So you can put me on the spot and ask me to test something, and we'll see how it performs. So I'm going to start with, this is the home screen. I'm going to start with risk review. This is what we recommend you do as a first pass Um, you can indicate which party you are to the agreement. This also can be codified so that it just knows what institution you are. But in this case, you would indicate who you are in the agreement. And then what it's going to do is it's going to analyze the agreement. The agreement could be one page, it could be 100 pages. And what it will do is now rank high, medium, and low risks in the agreement. It'll give me a summary of those risks. It'll tell me where those risks live in the contract so I can go see for it myself. So it's a great issue spotter, if nothing else. But then it also will help me resolve that issue. So here's a good one. High risk, auto renewal with unilateral fee increases. I know that this, for many of you, you're not looking at MSAs, so I don't want to over extrapolate it. I appreciate that this may not be an exact use case, but it's probably a familiar one nonetheless. Auto renewal with unilateral fee increases, we all understand why that's not good, and why this would be a high risk issue. If I expand that, it gives me an explanation of why it's concerned about the issue. I can go to jump to clause and it'll take me to the section of the agreement where this issue surfaced. And then there's this beautiful fix button here, and I can go to fix, and now it's going to propose language to modify, to rebalance, to override what is here. And so in this case, it's removing some language, it's adding more. Um, Customer needs at least 60 days prior written notice. Fees should not exceed 5%. So you can say, gosh, this is great. You don't know me well enough to know that 5% is not our position. But then you could easily go in and say, where it says 5% or where it says 30 days, I'm going to change it. Here's 5%. I'm going to say, 10%, and I can change this to 10. And now when I save that, it's now modified that red line. I can even add a comment. Matter of institutional policy, this is required. That's probably not the best comment, but you'll have a better one. I can save that. Now, if I apply it, it finishes the work, right? So you'll see the red line takes hold in the document, and there's that comment that you saw me write in. And so I can go issue by issue. It shows it is now resolved. Back to the hand on the wheel analogy, right? This is not telling you that you have to address any of these. You can say, nope, none of these are of concern to me, which is why the legal judgment, procurement judgment is so important, is that we're giving you recommendations. Those recommendations are validated. They are, we believe, of high quality. Our customers believe they're of high quality, but you will ultimately decide whether or not they're worthy of this specific contract with this specific business term. In addition to what we call risk review, we also have something called general review, where you can just talk to the document, where you can indicate again which party you are to the agreement. And in this case, it's going to start running analysis for things to point out, but it's going to be much more in memo format. So it's going to say, hey, here's a prioritized review of things to think about. So it becomes this contract review aid that is pointing to individual issues, even giving you sort of some suggestions. Here's a potential action you could take. Limit unilateral changes, indemnity scope. It's not, indemnity looks to be unilateral, it should be mutual. So it's something that you can now converse with, and you can say, I care most about indemnity, um, and what else do I care about? And publicity, let's say. Let's focus there. And now it'll go a little bit deeper in its analysis and focus on sort of what it's thinking about indemnity. So this is where general review allows you to just talk to the document. When I'm done with that, let's say, I sort of am like, hey, this was good analysis. I appreciate the output. I can then, it'll finish here in just a second. I can then go one step further and say, okay, now let's actually apply some of these changes, or at least propose some of these changes to make this document more balanced relative to the risks we've just identified. And in this case, what's going to happen is in just a second, it's actually going to give me line by line proposed red lines, which I can decide to apply or modify, that will, consistent with what you saw a couple of minutes ago, will take hold directly in the document. So in this case, it's identified a few issues, and where there's a red line proposed, you will see it. This one is a cap period is too long. It looks like it has 36. It's going to propose 12. Again, I can modify, I can add a comment, I can ignore, I can apply. If I apply, the red line hits the document as you saw it just do here. So that's how this works. Breezing through this quickly because I want to be mindful of time. I'm going to show a few more features and then we'll bring this to a close. Market intelligence, wonderfully powerful way to, in a more filtered or more structured way, compare an agreement to market standards. And in this case, it's pulling from the largest public contract database in the world. You can filter by agreement type, so filter by master services. And this, in this case, looks like there's 7,100 agreements. And what it will do, and I could limit the review just to red lines if I wanted, or it can be the entire document. And what it will do now is it's going to look at the public data set, it's going to look at this agreement, and it's going to identify anomalies, identify missing sections. It's going to show me sections that should be mutual, that are unilateral, etc. And it'll take, maybe 60 seconds or 30 seconds to produce that, because it's literally pinging off of 7,000 agreements in this case. But this type of exact filtering allows you to be more prescriptive in how you're benchmarking to public contract data. I'll pause there while it's rendering. Jen, I'm not sure if anything else has come in by way of questions.
No, I don't see any yet.
Okay.
We do have one in the Q&A.
Oh, okay, great. Dory, can you read that for us then?
Sure. Can we take or have different opinions on things, say indemnification language for specific sponsors? Like a general position, but we have sponsor X, which we work with a lot, and we know they will always have indemnification language we don't love, but will accept. Are those configurations maintained somewhere specifically, and can they be updated to include exceptions for additional sponsors as you go?
Yes. Great question. I'll show you that next. That's wonderful. The market intelligence, that's how long it took to run through 7,000 documents, pretty fast, all things considered. And now we have an output of high, medium, and low, and it'll give me sort of what it's basing it on, and what the recommendation is. So the market intelligence is another great feature for issue spotting, and recommendation changes. Okay, let's look. I'll come back to precedent review in a couple of minutes, being mindful of time, but I want to go into what we call playbooks because I think it relates to the question that Dory just walked us through. So in the case of a playbook, this is where our legal engineering team will be very helpful to you, but this is where you would codify your primary positions, your fallback positions, and even potentially account for individual vendors or partners that get an exception. And there's a couple of ways to do this, probably more than a couple. So some of this is us working with you to figure out the right way to configure it, but I'm going to filter by MSA. Looks like I have a couple of MSA playbooks here. If I run a playbook, let me start by just showing you what a playbook looks like. In this case, it's taking a set of rules and it's proposing changes. Let me actually go back on this one because I think I selected too friendly of a playbook. So give me 1 second. Let me just do this really quickly. Sorry, I'm sort of underneath the hood on this for a second. I'll show you the output. But in this case, it's going to analyze the agreement. For this playbook has 28 issues. These playbooks are easy to configure, they're easy to modify, and they're easy to duplicate. And so if you did have a base case playbook, one way to solve the question that was asked just a moment ago is I could have a playbook for that specific vendor. Now you may say, no, Preston, there's 15 different companies that have this deviation allowance, and I don't want a playbook for all of those. Okay, that's fine. There's another way to approach it. But if it's just a couple of vendors, you could literally have your Microsoft playbook. And that's how easy it is to just duplicate, modify, and then you could have your deviations there. In this case, you can see the compliance score up top, which means that this document is, very much not in line with our positions. I can go one by one. So in this case, let's see, termination for breach, 23. The rule is customer termination for Acme's material breach requires a 30-day cure, not immediate termination. And the rule that we have is ensure that the customer may terminate immediately. And so that's the rule that's being defended. And so the recommended change is, is accelerating or defending our position relative to this issue. You can also have guidance notes here where it could say, if this issue is flagged, defend it unless it's Microsoft, Google, or NVIDIA, whatever that looks like, in which case you might, that would be an instruction note that you could have. One more thing. You can also, and I'm going to flip the playbook on its back for a second so you can see the architecture under the hood. Another answer to that question is that I'll go to term for convenience. Ensure the customer may terminate for convenience or notice, if not, redline to add. I could say under fallbacks, I could add a fallback and say, we can accept term for convenience with Microsoft. And this rule basically says if this contract is with Microsoft, the user will be notified, the user meaning the legal user will be notified that it's acceptable because this contract is clearly coming from Microsoft. So you can create fallbacks that are codified at the playbook level. And then when it's run, it will identify or flag that it conforms or doesn't conform with that fallback rule.
Preston, another question came in, but I think it's also there's also an opportunity to let the folks know on the call here that the way that the software is working is not a control F functionality, because that context in which we shared that is an example. That's a perfect example where the way that that SimpleAI works and reviews the document is really relevant. So if you could maybe just touch on that, and then
Yeah.
I've got the second question that I'll ask you.
Yeah. So what Jennifer is referring to there is that there's a semantic power of um, AI tools like ours, which issue spots irrespective of how the issue is flagged. And in a previous world, this was just not possible. We would have had to have had a bunch of examples, a bunch of different ways liquidated damages is worded or term for convenience is worded. Like, what if it doesn't say term for convenience, but says, right to cancel at any time? And we're like, oh gosh, we were looking for term for convenience and it was worded differently and we missed it. Well, in the world of AI, that just doesn't come up. And the most compelling way I can express this to you is that the tool itself is multilingual. And what that means, and hopefully why it illustrates the point, is I can say something like, I need an indemnification clause in German, and it will just do that. And so I could literally write in German, tell me if there's a force majeure clause in this agreement that is in English, and it would go do that. And so that highlights the point that it's not looking for language match, it's looking for intent. And so within an English to English, it's now saying it will issue spot the tech transfer agreement that just landed on your desk that is 3 times longer than the normal one, that has way more legalese than you like to see. It will issue spot so that the rules, your playbooks, can be principle based. And so that's what Jennifer is referring to there. And this is a big part of the tool. I think, Jen, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, there's just one more question that's come in, and I just want to be mindful of time. So let's ask the question, and then I think it would be really valuable for us to show precedent review for those. So for those who can stay on for a couple of minutes past the question, we'll do that, and then certainly we'll send everybody the full recording. So here's the question.
Yep.
Is it possible to have a list of questions which need to be addressed as the contract is placed into the workflow process? This list differs from redlining that would be done during negotiations. I think that, as I understand it, may be relevant to workflow, but I don't want to read it.
Yeah,
Maybe, Preston?
maybe, but another way to think about it too, if I'm interpreting it right, is that a playbook doesn't have to just be for negotiating. It can be for issue spotting. Maybe I got that right, maybe not. What that means in practical terms, if I was implementing, I'll go back to an MSA playbook and I would actually, instead of turning on an agreement for me to be redlined, I would turn on red flag. And a red flag is it's a issue, it's a list of issues. And then it would say, here are the 20 issues identified in this agreement that makes it incompatible. So that's step one. And then step two is that I can use the AI assistant to just say, generate a report in table format that summarizes my red lines. You could do this for anything. That summarizes the playbook, that summarizes the risk analysis, whatever that may look like, and it will then produce that output. I mean, I'll probably need to give myself a little more real estate here, but it will go do this. I don't know why it's not giving it to me in table format. I can reprompt it, but this should be in table, but it's doing the work for me. And you'll have to believe that normally this would be visualized in a table rather than in text. So you can produce that sort of output. I know we're running up against time. There is a settings feature where in addition to playbooks, you can also configure your own style guide. It could be institutional policy. It could be institutional. You could have a clause library that says the institution must have an indemnification clause that looks like this, or termination rights that look like this. I know many of you have like riders that you bring into agreements. Like these things can be codified and automatically applied as well. We didn't get to precedent review today. We ran out of time, but this is where I can compare my own agreements and filter the same way I did with market data, where I'm filtering by a subsection of my own agreements to look for deviations. We've accepted this before, we've not accepted this before, etc. So I'm going to stop there. In terms of next steps for those who are interested, what I would say is that, if I can go back to my slide deck, is that typically what we would do is, that was too big, is we would send you information on IT and data privacy and data security, things that you care about that would be a necessary step before you did a trial. We'd love to do a group demo. If you're interested, bring in your team. We'll walk them through the software in more detail than I did today. Jennifer can send you pricing information and give you an overview of sort of our standard terms. Our pricing is very accessible. We have very higher ed friendly pricing. We offer pretty steep discounts for colleges and universities as 501(c)(3)s. And then we can also do proof of concepts, which are sort of large scale trials that involve numerous stakeholders. So I'll pause there. I know we're at time.